couple of other small things at the top. Tomorrow, President Biden will meet with a bipartisan group of governors to discuss innovative ways governors are working to get the people in their states vaccinated. The bipartisan group will share with the president some best practices on promoting access to vaccination, building confidence in vaccines, and ensuring that everyone is reached in the vaccination response. He will also acknowledge the instrumental role Democrats, Republicans, and independents have played in the vaccination efforts thus far, including helping deliver 220 million shots in the first 100 days of his presidency. And he will also discuss how this continued partnership with governors is critical to meeting the goal of achieving 70% of our adult Americans having one shot and 160 million Americans fully vaccinated by July 4th. The meeting will include Governor Charlie Baker of Massachusetts, Utah Governor Spencer Cox, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, New Mexico Governor Lujan Grisham, Maine Governor Janet Mills, and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Amr.
Thanks. Is there any reaction to the intensifying clashes in Israel? In the last couple hours, it's just gotten worse. I know Jake Sullivan was on the phone over the weekend with his counterpart. But is the president at this point getting involved? What's the next step forward? And then if I could just, I know we're tight on time. Second question, any readout on the president's remarks in the Bucharest 9?
Sure. Let me start with the first, and I'll go to the second. We are continuing to closely monitor the violence in Israel. We have serious concerns about the situation, including violent confrontations that we've seen over the last few days, as you noted, an escalation earlier today. You also noted, Amr, that in a call over the weekend with his Israeli counterpart, our National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan reiterated concerns about the potential evictions of Palestinian families from their homes, and they agreed that the launching of rocket attacks and incendiary balloons from Gaza towards Israel is unacceptable and must be condemned. So this is something that our national security team is closely monitoring, obviously across government. Certainly the president is kept abreast and is watching closely as well. And on your second question, this meeting, if we haven't put out a readout yet, we will shortly. Let me give you just a couple of highlights here that I think I have available. One moment. Let's see here. Let me work to get that to you shortly after if I don't have it available here. Here we go. So as Amr noted, the president spoke today with NATO's Eastern Flank allies in a virtual summit hosted by the presidents of Romania and Poland. He underscored his commitment to rebuilding alliances and strengthening transatlantic relationships. He conveyed his desire for closer cooperation with our 9 allies in Central Europe and the Baltic and Black Sea regions on a full range of issues, including global health security, climate change, energy security, and global economic recovery. And he also expressed his support for enhancing NATO's deterrence and defense posture, as well as the importance of allies increasing their resilience against harmful economic and political actions by our strategic competitors. In addition, he welcomed the opportunity to engage with these allies, as well as the NATO Secretary General, about alliance efforts to meet future threats, which will be discussed at the NATO summit in June. And finally, he stressed the importance of strengthening democratic governance and rule of law at home, within the alliance, and around the world. Indira, go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. Just a quick follow-up on the Bucharest 9. Was the president's decision to participate in the meeting was it driven by this desire to show a united front against Russia?
It was a desire to have a conversation and have a discussion with some important partners in Central Europe, NATO's Eastern Flank allies, about a range of issues, including security, of course, in the region, including our efforts to address the global health crisis, climate change, energy security. This group was gathering, or they had a preset gathering, and they invited him to address the gathering, and that's exactly what he did.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
On infrastructure, the president spent the last 10 days making very clear his view on the merits of the corporate tax increase, and the White House has rejected user fees as paid for. Bless you, Chris.
Bless you.
The Republicans have made clear that the 2017 tax law is a non-starter and are proposing user fees to pay for it. I don't understand what the deal space is here when their pay-fors are considered non-starters by you guys, and your pay-fors are considered non-starters by theirs?
Well, this is a big week ahead, Phil. So big week for someone who covered Capitol Hill and is now covering the White House. Look, I think the president's red lines are inaction and are anything that would raise taxes on people making less than $400,000 a year. Those are not areas where he is going to move. He is quite open, as is evidenced by the fact that he invited Senator Capito and a group of members to meet with him in the White House later this week. He's very open to having a discussion about where we can find agreement, where we can move forward. And he has been encouraged by the spirit in which Senator Capito and other Republican colleagues are engaging with him. And he's hopeful that the meeting will be constructive. Now, you're right, and what you touched on, which is an interesting piece of this, is that the disagreement is really about the pay-fors. There is agreement about the need to modernize our infrastructure, about the need to do more to create jobs in the economy. And he's looking forward to hearing what additional ideas they may have.
One more quick one. I understand where you guys and the Fed are, that inflation right now is transitory if it pops to the degree that it does. The jobs report kind of was a reminder that we don't necessarily have a roadmap for coming out of a once-in-a-century pandemic economically. Are you guys concerned about what would happen if you're wrong and it's not transitory and this ends up being an actual real problem in the weeks or months ahead when it comes to inflation?
Well, let me first say that our economic team watches this incredibly closely, including our Secretary of Treasury, who has an expansive background in watching inflation. And so we have confidence in both their assessments to date and also the fact that they will watch this as we continue to assess the state of our economy. I will say that, and the President will talk about this shortly, I should say, later this afternoon, that his view is that we need to, we've always believed that there would be ups and downs in our jobs reports. That is historically how it has gone. That there are a number of factors that contribute to it being a challenge for people to hire and people to rejoin the workforce. And there are steps we can take, and this is what he will talk about in his remarks as a government. We've obviously taken a number of those steps, including passing the American Rescue Plan, but there are a number of barriers to work. The biggest barriers we've seen: affordability of childcare, schools reopening, vaccinations is actually a huge factor. So when you dig into this data, which obviously we've done over the last couple of days, one interesting thing that struck the president as interesting is that the week of April 12th, which is the week that the data was compiled for the April jobs report was collected, at that point, only 18% of 18 to 64-year-olds were fully vaccinated. And as of May 9th, it's risen to 34%. And the 7-day moving average of positive COVID cases was 40% higher in mid-April than May 8th. Last week when the data was compiled for next month. So all I'm conveying is there are a range of factors. He'll talk about announcements on state and local funding, how that will be distributed, which will help keep police, firefighters, and others on the job. He'll talk about delivering assistance to restaurants, which is where we see major opportunity for employment or rehiring. He'll talk about providing guidance to child care centers, which will help ensure that that funding gets out the door to cover child costs. He'll talk about the employee retention tax credit, which will hopefully help small and medium-sized businesses. But he also believes that there are steps businesses need to take, which he'll also talk about. Employers can get people vaccinated. They can pay people a decent wage. These larger companies have received $1.4 trillion in money. They can do a better job of paying a decent wage to bring people back into the workforce. And so, there's a lot of steps different entities can take, and that's where he'll discuss this afternoon and where he thinks the focus should be. Go ahead.
Thank you. Two topics really quick. First, on ethics waivers. The White House apparently had ethics restrictions that were preventing officials who work here from communicating with the unions they worked at previously, and they waived them for somebody at OMB and somebody at the Made in America office, and I'm curious why that happened.
Well, first, since you gave me the opportunity, I will reiterate that this administration the president signed an executive order requiring all appointees across the federal government to sign the most stringent ethics code ever adopted by any White House. So as you referred to, in the narrowest circumstances when necessary and in the public's interest, the order authorizes agencies to grant limited waivers in consultation with White House counsel's office, including in the cases you're citing. President, of course, has stood strong strong for unions throughout his career, and he's proud to have leading labor voices in the White House. And there are circumstances, very, very limited, where it is in the interests of governing, in the interest of getting work done for the American people, to issue these waivers.
And then on the economy, so employment only rose by about 266,000 jobs in April out of 7.4 million or so job openings. How does the White House know that people are just choosing not to apply for jobs because the extra unemployment benefits are so good?
Well, first, let me say that we have looked at the data, and Secretary Yellen referred to this on Friday, or talked about this on Friday. We don't see much evidence that the extra unemployment insurance is a major driver in people not rejoining the workforce. We actually see the data, and our analysis shows that lack of vaccination, the lower rate, which is why I referred to the data and the week that it was taken, it has an impact. Child care has an impact. Schools reopening has an impact. But there is also the need to pay a livable working wage. And that's one of the reasons the president will talk about that this afternoon.
But as Bank of America economists who are cited in a Bloomberg story say, anybody making less than $32,000 a year is better off financially just taking the unemployment benefit. So is the White House creating an incentive just to stay home?
Well, again, the majority of economists, internally and externally of the White House, don't feel that unemployment insurance, something that was done at a time where to help unemployed people get through a very difficult economic downturn during a pandemic, is a major driver in our unemployment data. That there are other factors, bigger factors, that have been contributing to the numbers we saw on Friday. That's what we're working to address, and that's where we think our solution should be focused.
And just last one really quick. The Commerce Secretary says the main reason that people are staying home is fear. How does the White House know that people are scared? What is that based on?
Well, I think what she was referring to is the fact that there was a much lower vaccination rate just a month ago, and that people are fearful about getting sick. They are fearful about whether they're going to have the conditions to be healthy, whether they can send their kids to a child care center, whether there is a child care center. So those are all factors that are consistent with the examples and reasons I just provided. Go ahead, Josh.
You mentioned if you're monitoring inflation and that with the jobs report you expect this sort of, lumpy reports from month to month. Do you expect the same thing with the inflation report? Is the White House bracing for kind of an eye-popping top-line number given the base effects that it will be going off of, or are you not sort of cautioning that? Are you worried people will overreact to the one number that will come out Wednesday?
Well, obviously our analysis is